My sister, I know you've been reading the Bible, but as long as we say it's laid up, the wicked going to keep it. But God says it's time for us to tell that money, you don't belong to the wicked. You belong to us. And I want you to get in the right place. Money coming to me now. Somebody help me dance up here. Glory to God.
He is here. He is here. He is here. Ooh, ooh,
There comes a time that you have to learn how to inspire yourself, give hope to yourself, give joy to yourself, speak to yourself, preach to yourself, lay hands on yourself, bless yourself. You got to learn how to encourage yourself in the Lord, your God. Somebody lift your hands and say it.
Jesus is my Easter bunny. 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 Jesus is. Jesus is.
Abanawa, Shabashamayim, Kwadash, Hayah, Shamka, Yahweh, Malakotka, Taba'a, Ratazaka, Hayah, Aisha, Ba'aratazar, Kawa, Hayah, Bashamayim, Nathanawa, Lacham, Kal, Yawam, Wasalachnawa, Chaubwathnawa, Kasalachnawa, Chaubwathyanawa, Wala'a, Tabia Anawa, Manasaya 1, Abal, Hawashayanawa, Mayan, Rai, Kaya, Laka, Hamalakwa, Wa'ala, Wa'atapa Arath, La'ai Walamyam, Aman. Ya Baraka, Ya Baraka, Yahweh, Yahweh, Wa Yashamaka, Wa Yashamaka, Yahweh, Yahweh, Ya Yahweh, Ya Yahweh, Panyawa Al Yak, Panyawa Al Yak, Wa Yachanka, Wa Yachanka, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yasha'a Yahweh, Yasha'a Yahweh, Panyawa Al Yak, Panyawa Al Yak, Wa Yasham, Wa Yasham, Laka Shalom, Laka Shalom, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shah, Yahweh Shah, Barak Rapah, Barak Rapah, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shah, Yahweh Shah, Barak Rapah, Barak Rapah, Yasha Allah, Yasha Allah.
All right. All right, all right, all right, all right. Shalom, everybody. How's everybody doing? Is everybody okay? Yeah, hopefully everybody's all right, giving all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh. And of course, we do that in the name of his only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Shalom, everybody. How's everybody doing? Hopefully everybody is doing well. And welcome to another edition of the Lions of Israel class. So really quickly, brothers and sisters, we're not going to prolong too long. I know I haven't actually turned the camera on in a few weeks, so some of y'all forgot what I look like, but I'm here. I'm doing well. All praise to the Most High for that. So we're going to go ahead and get right into our presentation today. We don't want it to be too long. We want to get right through it. This is something that you brothers and sisters probably ad nauseum over the last couple of days have seen a bunch of classes concerning the Feast of Dedication, but this is us just putting our brick in as Lions of Israel. So I hope all you brothers and sisters are doing well. Of course, I'd be remiss, I'm sharing the wrong banner. I'd be remiss if I did not say, first of all, to brothers and sisters that are watching, please be sure to share the video, like the video first and foremost, of course, and share the video to all your local social media platforms to the best of your ability. All right. I didn't do a clubhouse room because there's a bunch of clubhouse rooms going and brothers and sisters are being edified over there. So I'm just going to go ahead and go live with the few brothers and sisters that are here. Mostly it's our brothers and sisters from the academy, of course. We're just going to go ahead and go into this. And of course, you brothers and sisters could share this information later to your platforms if the information blesses your spirit and you feel like other people can benefit from the information as well. Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I think I'm going to share my screen this way today. Hopefully I'm not going to be in the way because I'm going to be toggling between a couple of different I'm going to be PowerPoint as well as the actual scriptures. I'm wondering, should I do a clubhouse room? I don't want to take away from what brothers and sisters have going on over there. So more likely than not, I'm not going to. That's all right. We're just going to work with the people that we have here. And we're going to make understanding understood. Let me go ahead and change some of the stuff real quick. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's share the screen. Okay, we're going to share the entire screen. So that way there should not be any issues. Most High willing, there will not be any issues. Okay. So I want to say peace and blessings to everybody and welcome to another Feast of Dedication. We want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High for allowing us to complete another calendar year and to be able to observe another Feast of Dedication, right? It feels as though, at least to me, that we just were celebrating the Feast of Dedication just a couple of months ago, right? But the Most High saw fit for us to, make the next Feast of Dedication, which is today. And I give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High because everybody wasn't able to do that, right? And it's a beautiful thing because the Feast of Dedication represents in our history victory. When we look at the holidays that are set apart on the calendar for the captivity that we live in, which is America, a lot of these holy days, set apart days that they have, holidays as they call them, have really no meaning or concern when it comes to our people whatsoever. As a matter of fact, even some of the holidays that are on the calendar, when we look at our condition when these holidays were set apart, some of those holidays we were in slavery, like for instance, 4th of July. What does a Negro look like celebrating the 4th of July when the 4th of July, 1776, our people were in slavery? And our brethren, the Native Americans, were on reservations, right? They were at war with the American government all the way from that time up until the War of Little Bighorn, right? We were at the bottom, right? So what are we celebrating the 4th of July for? It has no meaning when it comes to us, right? New Year's Eve, what does that mean? In the dead of winter, what does that mean, right? When you look at Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Easter, those all have pagan origins. These holy days really have no meaning when it comes to America, but our holy days have meaning. And when we look at the Feast of Dedication, the Feast of Dedication is a holy day that deals with the Most High giving us the victory over our enemies, right? The same way the Passover, the Most High shows us that he delivered us from our enemies. The same way we look at the Feast of Purim, that was the Most High giving us the victory over our enemies. So you begin to start seeing a pattern amongst our holy days and how they have high significance as contraposed to the holy days of America. All right, so today we're just observing or commemorating the Feast of Dedication. So without further ado, we're going to get right into it, right? Now, first thing that we should know concerning the Feast of Dedication or the Feast of Hanukkah, right? Because there's some controversy amongst some Israelites who seem to make a controversy out of everything for no reason, is that the Feast of Dedication, as we call Hanukkah, which comes from the time of the Maccabees, they say that that is not a set-apart day. We don't read about that in Leviticus chapter 23 because Leviticus chapter 23 gives us a list of our set-apart days, right? What are called our holy days, right? And so you don't see the Feast of Dedication in Leviticus chapter 23. So what winds up happening is, of course, you have some Israelites who are contentious that say that it is wicked. Some even have gone as far as saying it's pagan to observe the Feast of Dedication when it comes to the Maccabees, right? However, we see a precedent of one of our forefathers doing the same thing before the Maccabees in the Bible. So would anybody say that? And the Most High inspired King Solomon to build this temple. Would anybody be so presumptuous to say that after the temple was completed and Solomon set aside days to celebrate the commemoration of the temple, would anybody be so presumptuous as to say that that was wicked or that was pagan? Of course not, because the Most High inspired him to build that temple. It is the same way. Later on, we see how the Most High was with the Maccabean family and how the Most High allowed the Maccabean family to get control of our temple again. So all they did was actually dedicate the temple the same way Solomon did. That's why some people refer to the Feast of Dedication as the Feast of Rededication, because the first dedication of the temple takes place during the time of King Solomon. This is the book of 2 Chronicles chapter 7. We're going to read verses 1 through 9. If you have your Bible, you should read along with us. It says, "Now, when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of God filled the house. And the priest could not enter into the house of the Lord because the glory of the Lord had filled the house." Verse 3, "And when all the children of Israel saw how the fire came down and the glory of the Lord upon the house, they bowed themselves with their faces to the ground upon the pavement and worshipped and praised the Lord, saying, For he is good, and for his mercy endureth forever." Verse 4, "Then the king and all the people offered sacrifices before the Lord. And King Solomon offered a sacrifice of 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the people dedicated the house of the Lord." This is the same thing that we read about later on with the Maccabees. They dedicated the house of the Lord. Well, Solomon did it first. Verse 6, "And the priests waited on their offices, the Levites also with the instruments of music of the Lord, which David the king had made to praise the Lord, because his mercy endured forever, when David praised by their ministry, and the priest sounded trumpets before them, and all Israel stood." This is your Psalms 100 right here. Remember Psalms 100 says, "Make a joyful noise before the Lord. Serve the Lord before with gladness. Come before his presence with singing." This is what the priests did. You also read about this later on in the Psalms as well. I believe it's the 150th Psalms as well. It's the same thing. When we went to praise the Most High, we went before the Most High singing. You had Levites that were singers, priests that were singers, and we played instruments too. Where you guys think the churches get it from? The churches are not singing about the right thing. They're not singing the right gospel. But that part they have right. That part they have right. I know a lot of Israelites can't get with that because the church is so corrupt. It's so pagan. There's so many things. A lot of our people, when you leave a church, you leave away from everything. But actually that part with the instruments and the music and the singing, they have that right. That's how we went before the Lord. But that's for another day, another time. Verse 7. Moreover, Solomon hallowed the middle of the court that was before the house of the Lord. For there he offered burnt offerings and the fat of the peace offerings, because the brazen altar which Solomon had made was not able to receive the burnt offerings and the meat offerings and the fat. Verse 8. Also at that same time, Solomon kept the feast 7 days. Wait a minute. Solomon kept a feast 7 days. You have Israelites that will argue about the Feast of Dedication, saying that we can't keep it because it's not in Leviticus 23, but Solomon kept a 7-day feast that was not in Leviticus 23. So are we going to say he was going off? Of course not. Verse 8 again. And at the same time, Solomon kept the feast 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great congregation from the entering in of Hamath unto the river of Egypt. And in the 8th day, they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days and the feast 7 days. When you look up that word dedication in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 9, the word there is Hanukkah, which is how you say Hanukkah. That's why I said, actually, what the Maccabees did was a rededication of the temple, because Solomon did the actual first dedication and ordained a feast. So later on, as we read during the time of the Maccabees are not doing their own thing. They're not transgressing the law of God. They are actually following the blueprint of their forefather, King Solomon, whom the Most High anointed to build the temple. They're literally doing the same thing he did. So there's nothing wicked about observing the Feast of Dedication, whether it be the one Solomon did, right? Which Solomon did not necessarily ordain that we should keep his dedication from year to year. He didn't ordain that. But as we read in the book of Maccabees, the Maccabees ordained that it was something that should be observed from year to year. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we also read about this in the book of Daniel as well. If you don't want to believe what's in the book of Maccabees, we also read about the book of Daniel chapter 11 as well. So you can't get away from it either way. Okay? Let's move on. Matter of fact, let me come out for 1 second. Let me come out for 1 second. 1 second. Y'all bear with me. We're gonna be all right. I want to share the whole entire screen. That's what I want to do. Right? I want to share the whole entire screen. Let's go back. All right, because I'm not so important. You guys don't need to look at me. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Yahushua, Jesus Christ, also kept the Feast of Dedication. This is the book of John, chapter 10, right? We're reading verses 22 and 23, right? It says, and it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter. And Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. So what you guys are looking at on this PowerPoint, you guys are looking at a recreation of the second temple. You're looking at a recreation of the second temple. We know the first temple was destroyed, and then the temple was rebuilt. It was rebuilt. So this is the second temple. And you had a certain portion of the second temple that was called Solomon's porch, right? Now, there was a modification that took place. You guys can look at the right-hand side of the screen. I'm not going to really get too deep into it right now. There was modification and work that was being done on the temple all the way up until the time, even when Christ was on the scene during the time of Herod, there were modification works being done on the temple, okay? So you read about something called Solomon's porch, right? So Yahushua was at the Feast of Dedication, and Yahushua was in a portion of the temple called Solomon's porch. You guys can see that right there. You guys can see the arrow right here. This whole thing right here with these different columns, so forth and so on. This is known as Solomon's porch. All right, you guys can do your own research about what that is and how that necessarily plays into the temple. But that's where Yahushua was, okay, at the time. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. It's not so important right now. Of course, we know all this was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. Okay, let's move on. Now we're going to get into the story of the Feast of Dedication. All right, this is the book of 1 Maccabees chapter 1. And we're going to start from verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chetam, had smitten Darius, king of the Medes, king of the Persians and the Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. So now you guys could see from the PowerPoint that I put in parentheses, this is Darius III, okay? Because you have to understand something, and the reason why I go over these things and I try to be a little bit as accurate as I can be when I go over these lessons is because you have titles that were passed down in ancient world. Let me give you guys some examples. The name Cambyses is a title that was passed down from different kings. You had Cambyses I, Cambyses II, etc., etc. The title Darius is a title that was passed down through different people. The title Nebuchadnezzar is a title that's passed down to different people. The title Herod is a title that's passed down to different people, right? The title of Seleucus or the title of Ptolemy, these are titles that different people had. So to be historically accurate, when we're reading in the Bible, and this also brings the Bible from the realm of myth that everybody wants to put it into terms of reality, we have to go and find out which Darius this was, because there was more than one. There was more than one. Okay? So we want to find out which one. This is part of although it's not the reason, it's part of the reason why your Apocrypha is not in your Bible today. This is one of the reasons why. Because this is real history. They can't argue against this. You can't argue against Herod, Nebuchadnezzar, Necho, the king of Egypt, and all the different names in the Old Testament that are given to you, right? Taharka, etc., etc. When you see these names in the Old Testament, nobody can deny that these people existed. Hezekiah, which is a king of Israel. You can't deny these people existed because there's archaeology to back it up, right? But this is a more contemporary archaeology in the Bible that nobody disputes. This is not disputed in academia that Alexander existed. It's kind of strange that it's not disputed that Alexander existed, but there's no primary history of Alexander at all. There's none. What we know of Alexander was written by third-party sources. Alexander didn't write nothing. He didn't write nothing. Primarily himself. But nobody disputes him in history. People will dispute Christ, John, Paul. Oh, they didn't write. We don't have nothing. Okay, but you don't have nothing that Alexander wrote either. But you don't deny his. You see the hypocrisy, but I really don't want to deviate. So I'm not going to, because I have a tendency of deviating. Not going to deviate. Let's come back to the scriptures, right? So it was and it happened that after Alexander the son of Philip of Macedonia, the Macedonian who came out of the land of Chetam, had smitten Darius, the king of the Persians and the Medes. You guys can see on the right-hand side of the screen, I'll give you guys the whole entire history going all the way down to Darius III, which is right around the time of Alexander. That's who he smote. That he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. The first over Greece meaning what? Meaning that before Alexander and Philip, right, you had Greek city-states, right? You had the whole Aegean Sea alliance. You had Troy and Athens and this one and that one. You had all these different people, but it was a different race of people back then. You had the Mycenaeans, the Minoans. Those are the Japhetic people. Those are the dark-skinned people of Europe. That's who that was. And they were eventually overthrown and usurped by Philip and ultimately Alexander. After the Samnite Wars, after the Peloponnesian Wars and all these different wars up there where these guys were fighting against each other, you had a new race or nation of people, which is the Edomites. They came into power. And so Alexander became the first king over a united Greece. Because prior to that, you had all the different Greek city-states, and they all had their own kings and all that, going all the way back, hundreds of years. But Alexander was the first to sit over a united Greece, and he was also of a different race or nation of people than the ones that ruled before. That's what this is going into. So hopefully everybody understands. Okay? Let's move on. Now, the reason why I'm going to go into certain things is because, again, the argument comes up, well, they're with the Apocrypha. Okay, good. Listen, it's in the Bible too. It's in the Bible too. It's not different. It's the book of Daniel, chapter 7. We're going to read verses 1 through 3. We're going to jump to verse 6. It's the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Verse 2, Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. Now, whether you brothers and sisters realize it or not, this is not for this PowerPoint to get that technical. That sea represents people. It represents a particular geographical region as well. The primary application is this is all going on, Salaki. This is all going on in a particular geographic region, but that this represents also peoples and kindreds as well. That's for another day, another time. Verse number 3. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. That's the proof that it's not just literally talking about a geographic area, but it's talking about people. Out of all these different peoples and kindreds and nations, and by the way, you can read about that understanding in Revelation chapter 17, where it explains to you about the seas being people, right? But we're not going to get into that today, right? And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. This goes into what? If you're in the academy, you should know this goes into anthropomorphism. We was talking about this, right? How different nations or kings or men are given characteristics similar to animals. That's called anthropomorphism. You're reading about that right here in the book of Daniel. The Most High is going to compare or show Daniel four great kingdoms that were going to rise on the earth, and he's going to all give them different characteristics of animals, right? But it's really talking about kingdoms. This is called anthropomorphism. Verse 3 again. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. We're going to jump down to verse 6. And after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard. This beast is the third beast, right? The first beast was a lion with eagle's wings. That is the Assyrio-Babylonian Empire. The Assyro-Babylonian Empire. The Assyrian Empire was first, and the Babylonian Empire usurped them. The second beast is a bear, right? And it raised itself up on one side. That's the Medes and the Persians. That's number 2, right? So we skip from verse 3 to verse 6. We're going to pick it up in verse 6. And after this, and lo, I behold, this is the third beast, like a leopard. What is this talking about? This is talking about the Greeks. When the Greeks would come into power. So the same thing that we're reading in the Apocrypha, believe it or not, is the same thing we're reading in the Bible. But the Bible is giving us a little bit more detail. And then we're going to go back to the Apocrypha, and it's going to make more sense, right? Why did the Most High compare this beast to a leopard? There's a lot of prevailing theories that are out there, right? You have a lot of different arguments. But I will submit one theory to this argument. Every time that you see Alexander the Great portrayed in history, you always see him portrayed with a leopard skin. This is a primary source, right, of Alexander on a horse, and you guys can see the horse is wearing the leopard skin coat. Do you guys see that? The arrow is right there. You see it with the leopard skin coat, right? Now, when you come down here, and I believe, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, forgive me, right? I didn't really look into it. It's been a while since I even put this PowerPoint together. I believe this is Colin Farrell. Am I right? Am I wrong? You guys can put it in the chat. This is Colin Farrell in the movie Alexander. What is the horse wearing, brothers and sisters? What is he wearing? A leopard skin covering. Same thing as in the thing. They always draw Alexander with a horse with a leopard skin covering, or sometimes he himself has on a leopard skin hat. Why is that, brothers and sisters? Because Alexander, when you do some deep research, Alexander was always compared to the god Dionysus. He was said to be Dionysus incarnated, brothers and sisters. This is an ancient image of Dionysus, and what is he wearing, brothers and sisters? He's riding a leopard. Do you guys see that? Dionysus is riding a leopard. Right down here, this is another image of Dionysus, and Dionysus is riding a what? Leopard. Alexander was always compared to Dionysus, and Dionysus is one of his heroes, one of the hero gods that he worshiped. That's the reason why you'll see Alexander in the movie. This is not, you think they just decided one day, hey, let's just put a leopard skin thing on the horse. No, they know what they're doing. They do research. They put this in this movie because Alexander was very fond of Dionysus, and he always had the leopard skin things wherever he was. They show you this in the movie, And it's also here in the ancient icons as well. Does everybody see this? Okay. So going back to the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 6, and I beheld the Lord never like a leopard. One of the reasons why Alexander was compared to a leopard, people could say speed and a whole bunch of other things. I've heard breakdowns and stuff like that, but literally Dionysus was one of his icons. He looked up to Dionysus, right? He looked up to him. He revered him. Understand that, right? Now let's keep going. Which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. What is this going into? This is going into when Alexander died, his kingdom was parted amongst 4 primary generals. 4. There were more than 4, but by the time their infighting was over, there was 4 primary generals that were left behind to rule his kingdom after he died. So the same thing that we're reading about in the Apocrypha is the same thing that we read about in the book of Daniel, chapter 7. This is Alexander, the son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of Chittim, smitten the king Darius, and he reigned the first over Greece. And when he reigned the first over Greece, after he died, he parted his kingdom amongst 4 generals. Let's move on. Now, hopefully you brothers and sisters could see this, right? Now, you could take this or you could leave this, but I like to share this with brothers and sisters. I like to share this with brothers and sisters because there are definitely some good information that could be used out of Josephus, and then there's also stuff in Josephus that's a little shaky, right? I'm just giving you brothers and sisters how I study. I tend to more or less deal with Josephus when it comes to the history of the Greeks and, of course, the Romans, because that was the time period that he was in, that he seems to be more accurate. The further back you go, you could take it or leave it. But this is pretty much within a couple of hundred years before Josephus came on the scene during the time of the Greeks. And we know Josephus was a historian. So Josephus says some very interesting things concerning Alexander and his coming into Jerusalem. So I just wanted to share this with you, brothers and sisters. You guys can take this or you could leave this. But I like to share information, as you brothers and sisters know, especially if you are in the academy. You know this is how I teach, right? So we're on page 244, Antiquities of the Jews. I pray you brothers and sisters could see this. I'm going to do my best to read it if you can't see it, right? We're going to go to the highlighted portion, right? It says, for Alexander, when he saw the multitude at a distance in white garments, while the priest stood clothed with fine linen, and the high priest in purple and scarlet clothing, with his mitre on his head, having the golden plate whereupon the name was the Most High engraved, he approached himself and adored the name and first saluted the high priest. So this is going into the history according to Josephus, according to what Josephus heard about Alexander. When Alexander came into Jerusalem, he was greeted by the high priest at the time, according to what Josephus says. And he actually came and reverenced the priest, according to Josephus. We're going to jump over now, and we're going to read this highlighted portion right here, because there's some interesting stuff in here as well that we could actually find in other places as well. But let's read and see what it says over here. This is what it says. It says, and when he had said this to Parmenio and had given the high priest his right hand, the priest ran along by him, and he came into the city. And when he went into the temple, he offered sacrifice to God according to the high priest's direction, and magnificently treated both the high priest and the priest. And when the book of Daniel was showed him, wherein Daniel declared that one of the Greeks should destroy the empire of the Persians, he supposed that himself was the person intended. So according to what the historian Josephus says, is that the priest actually went to Alexander and showed him the scroll of the book of Daniel and told Alexander that that person in the book of Daniel, that was him, right? Now you can read about this in Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 8, and Daniel chapter 11. I don't know which one they showed him. Maybe they showed him all. I don't know. But according to what Josephus says, the historian, the primary historian of the time of the Romans, according to what was passed down to him historically, when Alexander came into Jerusalem, The priest actually showed him himself in the Bible and said, that's you. Let's keep reading, right? Okay, to be the person intended. Here it is right here. It says, and as he was then glad, he dismissed the multitude from the present, but the next day he called them to him and bade them ask what favors they pleased of him. Whereupon the high priest desired that they might enjoy the laws of their forefathers. So Josephus is saying that once they showed Alexander that he was going to go forth and conquer, he asked them, okay, what can I do for you? And they asked him and said, just allow us, as you go and conquer and do what you're supposed to do, allow us to keep the laws of our forefathers, right? And might pay no tribute on the 7th year, and that we don't have to pay you no tribute on the 7th year, right? He granted all they desired, and when they entreated him that he would permit the Jews in Babylon and Media to enjoy their own laws also, he willingly promised to do hereafter that they desired, right? Now, I'm not going to read any more, but when you keep reading on this, again, I got the page right here for you guys, page 244. When you keep reading down further, right, it tells you that you had a lot of the Jews, the Israelites, right, that joined Alexander's army. This is before we're going to read in the Maccabees. This is very, very important. This is before the Maccabees. We already know in 1 Maccabees chapter 1. Most of us are not new. We've read the Feast of Dedication before. We read 1 Maccabees before. We know you had a certain group of Jews that voluntarily Hellenized. We're about to read that again now, right? When Antiochus sent out the decree, you had a certain group of Jews that was like, we're down with that. What I'm trying to show y'all is before Antiochus, hundreds of years before Antiochus, when Alexander first came in, you had Jews that voluntarily Hellenized then too. Yeah. You guys can read this for yourself. I gave you guys the page reference. I don't have to do everything for y'all, right? Matter of fact, let's just read it because I know somebody saying, no, just okay, here it is. It says, and when he said this to the multitude, that if any of them would enlist themselves in his army on this condition, that they should continue under the laws of their forefathers and live accordingly to them, he was willing to take them with him. So right there, right under the highlighted portion right here, if you keep reading right there, Alexander asked a lot of Jews to enlist themselves in the Greek army, and guess what? A lot of people did. This is before 1 Maccabees chapter 1, hundreds of years. Everybody got it? Okay. Okay. Let's move on. Now let's go to the book of Daniel chapter 8, verses 21 and 22, right? It says, and the rough goat, which is the king of Grecia, that's Alexander, same thing we read in Daniel 7, this is one chapter later, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king, that's Alexander, verse 22. Now that being broken, meaning when Alexander died, whereas 4 stood up for it, right? Meaning his 4 generals, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of that nation, but not in his power, right? Because when Alexander died and his kingdom was parted amongst these 4 generals, guess what they became, brothers and sisters? They became reservoir dogs. You ever saw that movie Reservoir Dogs? If not, go out and watch that movie Reservoir Dogs. They started fighting amongst each other. That's what they did. So they never was as powerful as Alexander, who had a united kingdom of Greece under his power. After he died, these guys started, the kingdom was split amongst them, and they start fighting for power. That's what happened. So they never was as powerful as him. The kingdom was already broken after he died, already, right? Now let's look at the book of Daniel chapter 11. I said it. Let's look at the same thing, right? This is Daniel chapter 11. So again, what did I tell you, brothers and sisters? We don't know if it was Daniel 7 that the priest showed him. We don't know if it's Daniel chapter 8 right here the priest showed him, or we don't know if it's this in Daniel chapter 11 we're about to read, right? Also, in the first year of the king, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th king shall be richer than they all. And his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Verse 3. And a mighty king shall stand up that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Verse 4. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided towards the 4 winds of heaven. This is the same thing we just read in Daniel 8. 4 stood up for it. Same thing we read in Daniel 7. It's all saying the same thing. right? Let's read verse 4 again. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided towards the four winds of heaven and not to his posterity. What is your posterity? Your posterity means your seed, your offspring. What is the prophet Daniel letting you know? When Alexander dies, his kingdom is not going to be passed down to his sons. It's going to be passed down to somebody else. Why is this? And you guys can do your own research. You guys see I have the arrow right there. Alexander had a son. Here's the problem. At the time of Alexander's death, the woman that was pregnant with his child, she was still pregnant. The baby hadn't been born yet. And Alexander died. So there was no child to lead the kingdom to because the child was unborn. So you don't really read a lot about that child in history. He was a nobody. We don't even know what happened to him. What we know was because Alexander was dying on his deathbed, he parted his kingdom unto his generals, and his son became a nobody. So the prophet Daniel prophesied about this before it happened, and now we go and we look into history and we can see Daniel was correct. I'm going to take a moment for a second, brothers and sisters. Just give me 1 second, brothers and sisters. 1 second, all right? I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second. I apologize. Give me 1 second. And make sure y'all hit the like button and share as well, man. Where are the, hold on a second. Where are the moderators, man? I see some madness going on. It must be on, what page do I have open? Okay. Wait, hold on a second. Yeah. It has to be this one. No, it has to be the other page. There's somebody, and this should be a private room, and there's somebody on the hold on, y'all. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it. And this goes to show you that there's a lot of bots on YouTube and everything. Hold on a second. I'm gonna get it. How do we have somebody talking about, I guess you guys erased it. Okay. How do we have somebody talking about share their photo or whatever? Like, what the hell was that? Okay. Let's go back, y'all. Let's go back. Let's go back. Salaki. Now, once we get past some things, we're going to start speeding up, right? So I don't want you guys to think for a minute that we're just going to do, this is not going to all be a PowerPoint. It's 4 chapters that we have to read. So it's not going to all be a PowerPoint. We're just building up to something, right? This is the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2, real quick. It says, ye know that you were Gentiles carried away into these dumb idols, even as ye were led, right? So you guys could see, this is a description of, this is an Israelite boy right here, right? Do you guys know that we were equestrians, like riding horses all the way back during the time of the Greeks? And I have the source right there, the horse and the jockey, right? And in the background, you have a pagan god right there. This is what we were doing when we were in Greece. The same way we were athletes in Rome and the same way we're athletes today is the same thing. Nothing has changed, man. We were carried away to these dumb idols and doing all these dumb things until we heard the gospel, right? Now, let's come back to first Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. So we understand what it means to be the first over Greece, right? After Darius was smitten, Alexander became the first king over a united Greece, okay? So we're going to come out of here now, right? And we're going to go to first Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. And we're going to read until we get to verse 6. We're going to go back to the PowerPoint. So it's first Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1, verse 2. And made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth. It's talking about Alexander, verse 3. And went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. Verse 4. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries to him. That's what we just read in the Apocrypha. When we were asking Alexander to make these concessions to us, don't tax us every 7th year, and can we still keep the customs of our fathers? We become tributaries to him, right? We have our governing body and stuff like that, but the governing body pays tribute to him, right? Verse 5. And after these things, he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Right? Now we're going to come back to the PowerPoint. Right? And verse number 6, it says, whereupon he called his servants. This is talking about his generals that we just read, such as were honorable and have been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom amongst them while he yet lived. So because his son wasn't born yet, something had to be done with the kingdom. He parted his kingdom amongst his generals, right? So you guys can look at this map right here. What you got, this is a modern map. So you guys are going to see a lot of the names on the map right now are modern names, right? But these are the 4 primary generals that Alexander parted his kingdom amongst. You have Ptolemy, who was over Egypt, right? You have Seleucus that was over Asia Minor. You can see Seleucus has the biggest kingdom out of everybody. That's very, very important, right? This is where a lot of your New Testament writings take place. When you're reading about them churches that Paul was writing to, when you're reading about them churches in Revelation chapter 2 and 3, these churches are in what was formerly known as the Seleucid Empire. That's important. That is important, right? You also have 2 other generals. You have Lysimachus and Cassander. But you guys are going to find out the Bible doesn't speak about these guys really at all. Cassander and Lysimachus, they're hardly mentioned in the Bible whatsoever. The 2 primary antagonists in the Bible are Ptolemy over Egypt and Seleucus over here. These are the guys the Bible pays great attention to, right? Okay, let's move on. And again, I told you, you have Lysimachus, you have Cassander, you have Ptolemy, and you have Seleucus. Let's move on, right? Now, when you read the book of Daniel chapter 11, the reason why I keep coming back to the Bible is because the same things that's written in the book of Maccabees are also affirmed in the Bible. That's how we know them to be true, right? When you read the book of Daniel chapter 11 is based around the wars between Ptolemy and Seleucus. We're going to read from the Encyclopedia Britannica. These are known as the Syrian Wars. 5 conflicts fought between the leading Hellenistic states, chiefly the Seleucid Empire. That's here. And see what Ptolemy is? These two. Chiefly the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Egypt, Lesser Macedonia. So Daniel 11 is all about those 2. That's what I was telling y'all. The other 2 are hardly mentioned, if at all. The complex and devious diplomacy that surrounded the wars was characteristics of the Hellenistic monarchies, right? We didn't really got to read all of this. What I wanted you guys to see was this is what Daniel 11 is based on. Ptolemy and Seleucus, right? Now, let's go back to the Bible and let's keep reading from verse 6 through verse 9, okay? Let's come back. We're going to toggle between verse. It says, whereupon he called his servants, such as were honorable with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom amongst them while he was yet alive, which I showed you. So Alexander reigned 12 years, then he died. And his servants bear rule, everyone in his place, right? Because he parted his kingdom amongst the 4 generals. Verse 9. And after his death, let's come back to the PowerPoint. Right here. Blow it up. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. Remember what I showed you guys. Let's come out of here and let's go back here. The 2 primary generals, Seleucus and Ptolemy. These are the guys that the whole book of Daniel 11 is based upon. They're the antagonists. They're antagonizing each other. Here is a line of the Seleucid kings all the way down, and the list goes on. And here's the list of the Ptolemaic kings all the way down. This is what you're reading about in Daniel chapter 11. This is also what you're reading about in the first 4 chapters of Maccabeestv. These are the guys. These are the ones that were fighting each other. The story is revolving around us and these kingdoms, not the other 2. Hopefully everybody understands. Now, we're in the book of Daniel chapter, First Maccabees chapter 1. All right, and we're going to read. Let's come out of it. And let me make a quick adjustment here because I made a mistake. Okay, see? We do this in real time. All praise to the Most High, right? This is 1 Maccabees chapter 1. Let's come back to the PowerPoint. And verse 10. And there came out of them. Who's the them? Who's the them? These two kingdoms, right? That were at war with each other. Seleucus, the first, and all his sons that come after him, and Ptolemy and all his sons come after him, right? Verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes. Now we have to get a little more specific. Of the Seleucid kings, I want to go back over here real quick and I want to show you guys something. Look at the Ptolemaic kings first. What do you guys see? When you look at the Ptolemaic kings right here, first, what do you guys see? It should be pretty plain. It's right in front of you. Everybody was named Ptolemy. Do you guys see that? Everybody is named Ptolemy. From Ptolemy 1 all the way to Ptolemy 13. They're all named Ptolemy, right? It's not so with the Seleucid line. Not so. Seleucus the first, his progeny, right? His son is called Antiochus. He's not even called Seleucus. And then his son is called Antiochus II, not even called Seleucus. Then he calls his son, Antiochus II calls his son Seleucus again. What I'm showing you guys is Antiochus comes from the Seleucid line of kings. Don't let the name change confuse you. The Antiochian kings are from the Seleucid line. That's why I have this here so you guys could see it running all the way down. Verse 10 again. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, right? Son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So Antiochus the fourth, aka Antiochus Epiphanes, is 137 years removed from when Alexander became the first king over Greece. And then he died. Then the kingdom was parted amongst his generals. And 137 years later, you have a guy by the name of Antiochus, which is from the Seleucid line, that rises up. This is what we're reading about in the book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1. All right? Verse 11. 1 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 11. In those days, went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we had much sorrow. So you had a group of our people, right, that were wicked amongst Israel, like always. That's a perpetual thing all the way through our history. They said they wanted to go and make a covenant or an agreement with the heathen. For since we departed from them, we had much sorrow. So this device pleased them. Verse 13. Then certain of the people were so forward herein, they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. We're going to read about what some of those ordinances is, but I'm going to give you guys an example of an ordinance that we started following the heathen behind, and it will help us understand what we read in the New Testament, right? You guys can see I have a book here called The Jews in Their Land by David Ben-Gurion. David Ben-Gurion is he the first or the second? I believe he's the first. I think Golda Meir is second, or I might have it twisted. But this guy was one of the prime ministers of Israel, and he put together a book called The Jews in Their Land, right? Let's go to page number, on page 129. You guys can see it right in the corner right there. Did my best to get the page number so you guys can see it in case anybody wants to get a hold of this book. It's pretty cheap on Amazon for now, until everybody starts going to order it. Let's read what this book says on page 129. What was one of the ordinances of the heathen that we started doing? Look at this. In Jerusalem, the opponents of Onias gained control of the temple, apparently as a result of the change, and took the earliest opportunity to introduce radical administrative reforms that would enable them to carry out their plans. In the temple in Jerusalem and throughout Judea, life in the capital was revolutionized completely and alien manners, names, and forms of behavior were introduced. Did you guys catch that? Alien manners, names, and forms of behavior were introduced. Let's keep reading. For example, Joshua, the brother of Onias, and one of the leaders of the revolution, changed his name to Jason. Brothers and sisters, the name Jason is a Hellenized Greco-Roman way of saying Joshua. So when these wicked Israelites decided to go to King Antiochus to get licensed to start doing wickedness, one of the first things these devils did, they started changing their names. Their Israelite names were no longer good enough for them. They wanted Greek names. Does everybody see that? They wanted Greek names. That makes sense. Because we're talking about during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. We got to come out the PowerPoint and we got to go back a little bit. Sorry, y'all. We got to go back a little bit real quick. We're going to come right back to it. Antiochus was what time? This is 175 through 164 BC. Let's just deal with the latter date, 164 BC. This is 164 years before Christ. So 164 years before Christ, you had Israelites that started running around using Greek names. So why is it such a mystery to people when we start seeing during the time of the Romans, Israelites with Greek names, like Luke, like Mark, like Titus, like Timothy? This does not make them actual Greeks. This does not make them so-called white people. No, black people, Israelites, started using Greek names 164 years before Christ was born. We started doing that crap. Does everybody see that? Okay. Let's move on. Let's go to 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 13. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Verse 14, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. So these places of exercise, because we exercised before the Greeks ever came into power. Of course, we exercised. Of course, we trained for war. We did all that stuff. We knew martial arts. We did all that stuff. But hey, here's the thing. These places of exercise was not after our customs, but they were after the customs of the heathen, right? When you guys look, the etymology of the word, right, of gymnasium, right, it literally means, let's get right to the point, to train naked. That wasn't our custom. Men didn't walk around with their manhood swinging all over the place and everything, sword fighting, as I call it. They didn't do that. But when the Greeks came into power, they had different customs where they exercised. It was different. And these wicked ass Israelites asked Antiochus, could he come and build a place like that over there in Jerusalem? It literally means to train naked, from gymnos, which means naked. Literally, that's what it means. This is the etymology dictionary. You guys can see that. Let's move on. I'm going to skip this video for now. This is the history of the gym. And, you know, I see this when I go to the gyms today, man. I used to work as a personal trainer at a franchise called Bally's Total Fitness. That was on the East Coast. I'm not sure if it was anywhere else. And literally, the gym would have to throw people out of the gym because it wasn't the women, it was the men, the Edomites, the white men. They would be in the sauna, literally having sex. And the gym manager would get complaints from people that just wanted to go use the sauna just to use it. You'd have men in there actually having sex, and the gym manager would have to go down there, and of course they would call the trainers to back up. I never went, but this is what was going on in the gyms, man. You go into the damn locker room and you see it's mostly white men and Hellenized in the mind Negroes, but mostly white men. But then you see a few Negroes walking around with everything out, everything's swinging, having a conversation with another man like it's normal. You see white men doing that, and you see niggas following behind it too. I ain't got to show y'all a video. If you've been in the gym, you know what I'm talking about. It's crazy, man. It's freaking crazy. Let's move on, man. All right. Real quick. I'm not going to read this all right now because I don't want it, because we have a lot of reading to do. When you go to 2 Maccabees chapter 4, right? 2 Maccabees chapter 4, you guys could pick it up from verse 19, although starting from verse 7 all the way down is good. From verse 7 to verse 20 is good. But starting from 2 Maccabees chapter 4, particularly the point is in verse 7, what you brothers and sisters are going to find out, and by the way, I put this little leaf here to cover this madness. There were pagan gods that were affiliated with these gyms in Greek and that the Greeks had. They were pagan gods, and they would literally have statues of these pagan gods in the gym. There was 3 of them, Hercules being the primary god that will be in these gyms, literally, right? And you can see right here in 2 Maccabees chapter 4, when the conversation about following after the customs of the Grecians is being spoken about, when the conversation about building places of exercise is being spoken about, they also speak about right here, you guys can see it highlighted, a sacrifice to Hercules. That's not there for nothing. Hercules is literally one of the patron gods of the places of exercise that the Greeks built. And we asked the Greeks to build one in where we were, which was wicked. But I don't want to spend too much time on that. Let's go back, right? And you guys can see these are the Greek Olympic gods, right? You have the major gods. This is their Greek name, and on the right-hand side is their Roman equivalent, right? And the same thing, you have what is called the lesser gods right here, the Greek Olympic gods right here. And it's in alphabetical order. You guys can see Hercules is right there. And Hercules' name actually translates over to the Roman Empire as well. Okay? So I just want to show you guys that real quick. Let's move on. Okay, now let's come out for a second and let's pick it up where we left off in the scriptures, right? I'm going to pick it up verse 12. Verse 14, sorry. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen and made themselves uncircumcised. So the custom of being uncircumcised was right around this time when we started following after the customs of the heathen. We stopped circumcising our children. To be circumcised was looked down upon. This is 164 years before Christ. So when you see a conversation in the book of Romans chapter 2, when you see a conversation in the book of Acts chapter 15, when you see a conversation in the book of Galatians chapter 2 and chapter 3, an argument about circumcision is because this is 164 years after we as Israelites, some of us that were pagans, stopped circumcising our children. And it was passed down from child to father to son to son to son, mother to, well, really child, father to son to son to son to son to son. So by the time we pick it up during the Roman period, when Paul is going around teaching the gospel, a lot of these Israelites that have been living in these areas that were under control of the Greeks have been uncircumcised for generations. Starting from here. So the Israelites that are in Jerusalem are looking down on these Israelites in the diaspora, like these guys are Greeks. Right down to being uncircumcised. And they made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the Holy Covenant and joined themselves to the heathen, right? Let me see something real quick. Okay. So now we're going to jump back to the PowerPoint and pick it up from verse 16. It says, now when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt that he might have dominion over 2 realms. Remember what I told you guys? The focus of Maccabees and Daniel is on Antiochus and the realm of Egypt, which was ruled by the Ptolemies. The other 2 guys are not relevant like that in the scriptures. That's what I was telling you. Now you guys are seeing that. So what we have to do is we have to look at the list of the Antiochian kings, and we can see this is Antiochus right here, Antiochus IV. So if he wanted to go to war, to make war against Egypt, we have to find somebody that was ruling at the same time he was, which is Ptolemy VI. So the Bible doesn't tell us this. We have to go into, this is why I say sometimes you do need extra biblical sources to break down scriptures, because the Bible doesn't always give you the names. You got to go look. So Antiochus went to war against Ptolemy VI. That's what this is going into, verse 16. Okay? So now we can read. Now we don't have to do so much PowerPoint. Now we can read from verse 16 all the way down. Let's go. Whereupon he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots and elephants and horsemen and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt. There were many Ptolemies. We just found out that's Ptolemy VI, right? But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Thus, they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt and took the spoils thereof. Verse 20. And after that, Antiochus had smitten Egypt. He returned again in the 143rd year and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary and took away the golden altar and the candlestick of light and the vessels thereof. Verse 22. And the table of showbread and the pouring vessels and the vials and the censers of gold and the veil and the crown and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. So he went into the temple, right, and took all of our holy things. Verse 23. He took also the silver and the gold and the precious vessels. Also the hidden treasures which he found. Verse 24. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly. Sounds just like a Edomite, just like a so-called white man, spoke very proudly. But the Most High allowed this to happen because the Israelites were wicked. So he thought he did something of himself. That's not the case. Verse 25. Therefore, there was great mourning in Israel in every place where they were, so that the princes and elders mourned, the virgins and the young men were made feeble, and the beauty of women was changed. Every bridegroom took up lamentation, and she that sat in the marriage chamber was in heaviness. The land was also moved for the inhabitants thereof, and the house of Jacob was covered with confusion. After 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spake peaceable words unto them, but all was deceit. Sounds just like a white man, the same way the Spaniards came over here and spoke with smooth words and then massacred the people. For when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon a city and smote it very sore and destroyed much people of Israel. And when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire and pulled down the houses and the walls thereof on every side. But the women and children took they captive and possessed the cattle. Then builded they the city of David with a great strong wall and with mighty towers, and made it a stronghold for them. And they put therein a sinful nation, wicked men, and fortified themselves therein. They stored it with armor and victuals. And when they had gathered together the spoils of Jerusalem, they laid them up there, so they became a sore snare. For it was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary, and an evil adversary to Israel. Verse 37. Thus they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary, and defiled it, insomuch that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them. Whereupon the city was made a habitation of strangers. So a lot of our people, by the way, this is very important to understand. History repeats itself, right? Let's read verse 38 again. Insomuch that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them. What happened in 70 AD? What did Christ warn us to do in 70 AD in Luke 21? When you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then would you flee to the mountains. Same thing happened when the Greeks came. A lot of us fled. Whereupon the city was made a habitation of strangers and became strange to those that were born in her, and her own children left her. Same thing happened in 70 AD, brothers and sisters. Verse 39. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into mourning. Her Sabbath into reproach. Her honor into contempt. Right? And as had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency was turned into mourning. Verse 41. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people. So this is the beginning of them telling us that we need to Hellenize. We need to be the same as them. And everyone should leave his own laws. So all the heathen agreed to the commandment of the king. So you had a lot of other nations that were also under Alexander's rule, and they agreed and they Hellenized voluntarily. Verse 33. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. So what is this showing you? You had a lot of our people that voluntarily Hellenized. Just like 164 years before this, you had a lot of Israelites that joined Alexander's army voluntarily. So the first wave of Hellenization was voluntary, right? Now we're going to come back to the PowerPoint. Verse 44. Oops. First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 44. It says, "For the king has sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land," which we were already, many of us, privy to do. That's why we asked them to build gymnasiums, and we did a whole bunch of stuff, made sacrifices to Hercules and everybody else. We was doing that, right? Verse 45, "And forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and the festival days," right? Verse 45. Verse 46. "And pollute the sanctuary and the holy people. Set up altars and groves and chapels of idols and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts." Because the Most High gave us clean animals to sacrifice, but now they're saying we should set up altars and sacrifice unclean beasts, right? Verse 48. "And that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the laws and change all the ordinances." Why? Because verse 49 is also very important. Why? Because the first generation of people that would do this stuff and voluntarily Hellenize, they wouldn't forget the laws. But you would teach this to your children, and your children would teach it to their children. And after a couple of generations, that's why it says what it says, to the end. What is the end of it? After a couple of generations, our foreparents, right? So let me rephrase that. After a couple of generations, the great-grandchildren would not remember the laws no more, because they'd be so immersed in Greek customs. Does everybody understand? Verse 50. "And whosoever shall not do according to the commandment of the king, he should die." So if you didn't do according to the commandment of the king and voluntarily Hellenize, you should be put to death. Verse 51. "In the selfsame manner wrote he to his whole kingdom, and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city." And he set people up to watch and make sure that they were doing this thing. Verse 52. "Then many of the people were gathered unto him, to wit, everyone that forsook the law, and so they committed evils of the land." Again, showing you that you had a remnant of our people that voluntarily did this. We haven't read the forcing yet. We're all the way to verse 52. And so far, everything that we've read, everybody that did this stuff did it voluntarily. Verse 53. "And drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for succor." Verse 53 should also, if you're somebody that's done any studying or research, verse 53 should also ring some bells for you. The same thing would happen when the Romans came into power. You had a lot of Israelites that went into secret places. Those secret places we went into during the time of the Romans, those places are called the catacombs. You guys see how history constantly repeats itself? You guys see how history is circular, it goes in circles? Before the Romans ever came into power, when the Greeks came into power, they did the same thing, forced themselves upon us, and you had a lot of Israelites that wound up going into places of hiding. The same thing would happen when the Romans came into power. A lot of Israelites would go into places of hiding that today we call the catacombs. Okay? Verse 54. "Now the 15th day of the month, Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and builded idol altars through the city of Judah upon every side." So what we want to know about is we want to know about this abomination of desolation. First thing we need to know about is Daniel already prophesied about that. For those Israelites that want to reject the Apocrypha, we see it in the book of Daniel. That's how we know that this is right. Daniel chapter 11, verse 31. "An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength." That's what we just read about over here. They set up idols. We were sacrificing unclean flesh. This is giving you the details. Daniel is getting to the point. "And they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice," right? "And they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate." This is Daniel's 11 and 31. Daniel prophesied about this happening, and this is being fulfilled in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 54. They set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar. What is the abomination of desolation, brothers and sisters? Let's read it right here. This is from the same book, The Jews in the Land by David Ben-Gurion. We're on page 132. It says, right here, we're going to read this paragraph, the Seleucids, right? The Seleucid military measures led family to sacrilege. On the 25th of the Hebrew month Kislev, 167 BC, an abomination of desolation was placed on the altar of the temple in the Lord's sanctuary in holy Jerusalem. The graven image of an earthbound god of the skies, Zeus, was set up. So what was the abomination of desolation that was put on the altar by the Greeks? They put their god Zeus on the altar. That's what they did, okay? But we know that in our law, it says 2 witnesses. So we go to the Jewish encyclopedia, and we see the same thing. Same literal thing. The Jewish encyclopedia, you guys can see the search I did. The abomination of desolation. This was probably the Olympian Zeus or Baal Shemem. Why is it saying Zeus or Baal? Why is it saying Zeus or Baal? Zeus is a Greek god, so-called god, right? But Baal is not a Greek god. So why is it mentioning Zeus and Baal? Why is it conflating the two? That's interesting. Well, what you guys are going to find out is the Romans and the Greeks, their gods, their pantheon is a remix of ancient civilizations, right? Here is a list of ancient civilizations and their gods of thunder, which is, you guys today, you have Thor, right? You got the whole gag on Marvel Comics, Thor and all that stuff like that. Brothers and sisters, that goes back to Baal. Baal is the god of thunder and lightning and rain. You can read about that in 1 Kings 18 with the prophet Elijah. He's the Canaanite god of rain and thunder and lightning and all that. His Egyptian name is Set. His Greek name is Zeus. So all the Greeks did was they remixed these ancient gods, made these gods and fashioned these gods in their image, conquered us, took our temple, and put this pagan god Zeus on our altar, which really goes back to the god Baal. You guys see that? It's the same thing. Same thing. Let's move on. Verse 56, Salakia, right? And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law, which they found, they burnt them with fire. What is this showing you? There were many copies of the books of the law. It wasn't just one copy. They found many copies of the books because you had scribes. And they rent the books in pieces and burnt them with fire, the ones they found. But there were other copies. They only could burn the ones they found. But the ones that were in the temple were not the only copies. This is an argument we have all the time on Clubhouse and on the street. So people are, where's the original Bible? There was no original Bible. There were many copies. And throughout several times in history, the copies that the nations would find, they would burn them. But there was always more. Verse 57. And whosoever was found with any book of the Testament, or if any committed to the law, the king's commandment was that they should be put to death. Thus did they by their authority unto the Israelites every month, to as many as were found in the cities. So what they did was every month they went throughout the cities, just like if you're in jail and they come to your cell every whatever amount of time and flip over the mattress and check everything and see what you guys are hiding and see if you have any so-called contraband. Well, like the Greeks did that. Every month they would go around Israel looking for copies of the law to make sure that we weren't keeping the commandments. That's what they were doing. All right. Real quick, let me just come out of here real quick. All right. Let's keep reading. Right. Verse 59. Now the 5 and 20th day of the month, they did sacrifice unto the idol altar, which was upon the altar of God. at which time, according to the commandment, they would put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised. So you had certain of our women, our wonderful sisters that were keeping the commandments and had the faith. Well, those women were put to death in their children because they didn't want our children to be circumcised. And of course, they did this to put fear in other people. That's how come we read about the arguments about circumcision in the New Testament, because it had been generations of this thing being implanted in our people not to be circumcised. Verse 61, and they hanged the infants about their necks and rifled their houses and slew them that had circumcised them. 62, howbeit many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing. Wherefore they rather to die, that they might not be defiled with meats, and that they might not profane the holy covenants. So they died, and there was great wrath upon Israel. Why? Because the Most High allowed that thing to happen, because we as the Israelites got wicked, right? Okay, let's come back to the PowerPoint, and let's pick it up. First Maccabees chapter 2. Now we're going to start doing a lot more reading. There's no more PowerPoint, really, for the most part. We're going to do a lot more reading to get through this. It's First Maccabees chapter 2, verse 1. In those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jorib from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. And he had 5 sons, Johanan called Caddis, Simon called Thasai, Judas, who was called Maccabeus, and Eleazar called Avaron. What should everybody be picking up? I just showed it to you guys. These guys had Israelite names. They also had Greek names too. You guys see that? They were Israelites, but they all had Greek names too, because that became a thing, unfortunately. All right, let's go. These are those names that we just saw real quick. This is the Maccabean dynasty. These are the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees, right? Started from Mattathias all the way down, right? These are them. This guy right here, Hyrcanus, this is not for today. This guy right here, Hyrcanus II, he's the guy that forced the Edomites to follow our customs. And this is where you have Antipater, Herod Antipater. Herod Antipater was amongst those people that were forced by the edge of the sword to start keeping our customs. And eventually, we know the Roman Senate set up the Herods as kings over us. So there's a whole history with this, but that's not for today, okay? So we're done with the PowerPoint now, okay? So we're going to just go on and we're just going to actually read scriptures, right? You guys give me 1 second if you guys don't mind. Just give me 1 second real quick. Bear with me 1 second. Just trying to set something up. All right, let's go. All right, we're going to come right back here. And let's start reading. We're going to pick it up from verse 6, right? This is talking about Mattathias, verse 6. And when he had saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me. Wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city to dwell there, when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers. Verse 8, her temple has become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. This same thing right here happened when Titus and Vespasian came in and destroyed the temple too. Look at this real quick. This is called the Ark of Titus. This would happen hundreds of years later again, right? This is called the Ark of Titus, right? I'm going to give you guys this one right here. And you can see the Romans, they went into our temple in 70 AD and stole everything. That's what this is. This is called the Ark of Titus, right? But this happened hundreds of years before, during the time of the Maccabees too. They went into our temple and all of our glorious vessels were carried away into captivity. Cyclical. The history keeps happening to us because we keep messing up, and the Most High keeps allowing these nations to come against us. Verse 10. What nation have not had part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? That's why all nations are going to have to suffer. There ain't going to be no exceptions, because there's no nation that didn't have a part in our destruction. Verse 11. All her ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman she is become a bondslave. Verse 12. And behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty and our glory, is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. To what end, therefore, shall we live any longer? Then Matthias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn very sore. In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city of Modin to make them sacrifice. And when many of Israel came unto them, Mattathias also and his sons came together. Then answered the king's officers and said to Mattathias on his wise, thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in the city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yea, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem. So shalt thou and thy house be in number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and rewards. If this had happened to Charles Barkley or Shaquille O'Neal, they would have did it. Silver and gold, they would have did it. Verse 19. Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away everyone from their religion of their fathers and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. He said that we ain't selling out. God forbid that we should forsake the law and his ordinances. Verse 22. We will not hearken unto the king's word to go from our religion either on the right hand or the left hand. So I want to say this real quick. This kind of goes with Romans chapter 13, where it says, obey the powers that be, for there's no power that's unless it be ordained of the Most High. That's not telling you that everything that Esau says, if it's wicked, you have to do. Because that's what some Christians teach. That's not what it's saying. The Most High put them in power for a certain amount of time, so we have to obey their laws as long as their laws don't interfere with our laws, right? So if you have to pay taxes, you pay taxes. You have a speed limit, you obey the speed limit, so forth and so on. You need a license to carry a gun, you get a license to carry the gun, whatever it is you do that because that doesn't interfere with your laws, but you don't hearken to the king's words if it makes you go against God's word. Verse 23. Now, when we had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sights of all to sacrifice on an altar which was at Modin according to the king's commandment. Which thing, when Mattathias saw it, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to show his anger according to the judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. So he went and slew the sellout. That's what he did. We can't do that in this kingdom, but that's what he did. Verse 25. And the king's commissioner was compelled men to sacrifice. He killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down. Thus dealt he zealously for the law of God, like Phinehas did unto Zambri, the son of Salom. And Matthias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, whosoever is zealous of the law and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me. So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left all that ever they had in the city. They went into the mountains like the Jews fled into the catacombs during the time of the Romans. Verse 29. Then many that sought after justice and judgment went down to the wilderness to dwell there, both they and their children and their wives and their cattle, because afflictions increased sore upon them. Now, when it was told to the king's servants and the host that was at Jerusalem in the city of David that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were gone down into secret places in the wilderness, they pursued after them a great number, and having overtaken them, they camped against them and made war with them on the Sabbath day. And they said unto them, let that which ye have done hither unto sacrifice suffice. Come forth and do according to the commandment of the king, and ye shall live. But they said, we will not come forth, neither will we do the king's commandment to profane the Sabbath day. So then they gave them the battle with all speed. Howbeit they answered them not, neither cast they a stone at them, nor stopped the places where they lay hid, but said, let us all die in our innocency. Heaven and earth will testify for us that ye put us to death wrongfully. See, a lot of the Jews, I'm not going to front, I don't want to confuse anybody. A lot of the Jews by this time were following that whole oral tradition of you can't do anything on the Sabbath. You can't pick corn. If somebody attacks you, you can't fight. They had this mentality because this is what was being taught by the prevailing teachers at the time. They had this whole oral tradition that was not in the Mosaic law. Nobody said you can't defend yourself at all. Right? Verse 38. So they rose up against them in battle on the Sabbath and slew them with their wives and children and their cattle to the number of 1,000 people. Now when Mattathias and his friends understood hereof, they mourned for them right sore. And one of them said to another, if we all do as our brethren have done and fight not for our lives and our laws against the heathen, they will now quickly root us out the earth. At that time, therefore, they decreed, saying, whosoever shall come to make battle with us on the Sabbath, we will fight them. Neither will we die all as our brethren that were murdered in the secret places. Why? Right, because it was never in the law that you can't defend yourself on the Sabbath. It said no servile work, no buying or selling. It doesn't say don't defend yourself. That's crazy. Verse 41. At that time, therefore, they decreed, saying, Salaki, verse 42. Then came there unto him a company of the Assyrians, brothers and sisters, the Assyrians. Who's that? Who's that? Who are the Assyrians? Let's look at what Wikipedia tells us, right? The Hasidians, also known as the Assyrians, right here. Do you guys see that? The Hasidians are mentioned only 3 times in the book of Maccabees. As a result, they are the object of much scholarly speculation. Opinions are divided as to whether the Hasidians were the predecessors of who, brothers and sisters? The Pharisees. The Pharisees. The Essenes, or both. So there is a prevailing thought, brothers and sisters, that these Assyrians are would eventually, out of them, would come your Pharisees. This is important. What I'm showing you, brothers and sisters, is at the outset or the advent of these people, they were righteous. But by the time they got up under the Romans, they have become, not all of them, but the leaders have become corrupt too. But this group started off righteous. So when somebody calls you a Pharisee, that's not an insult. They started off righteous. Gamaliel, who taught Paul, was a Pharisee. Nicodemus was a Pharisee who followed Christ. Not all the Pharisees were wicked. And they started off righteous. Right here. Verse 42. Then came to him a company of the Assyrians, who were mighty men of Israel, even as such were voluntarily devoted unto the Lord. That's why they were so law-driven in the New Testament. That's why. Verse 43. Also, all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them and were a stay unto them. So they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger and wicked men in their wrath, but the rest fled to the heathen for succor. Verse 45. Then Mattathias and his friends went round about and pulled down the altars. And what children soever they found within the coast of Israel uncircumcised, those they circumcised valiantly. So they started going around trying to undo what these wicked Israelites that made a league with the Greeks were doing. Verse 47. They pursued also after the proud men, and the work prospered in their hands. So they recovered the law out of the hands of the Gentiles, out of the hands of the kings. Neither suffered they the sinner to triumph. Verse 49. Now when the time drew near that Mattathias should die, he said unto his sons, now hath pride and rebuke gotten strength, and the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. Now therefore, my sons, be ye zealous for the Lord, and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers. Call to remembrance what acts our fathers did in their time, so that ye receive great honor and everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful in temptation, and it was imputed to him for righteousness? Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandments and was made Lord of Egypt. Phinehas, our father, being zealous and fervent, obtained the covenant of an everlasting priesthood. Jesus, talking about Joshua, for fulfilling the word, was made a judge in Israel, right? Caleb, for bearing witness before the congregation, received the heritage of the land. David, for being merciful, possessed the throne of an everlasting kingdom. Elias, this is talking about Elijah, for being zealous and fervent for the laws, was taken up into heaven. Ananias, Azarias, and Misael, by believing, was saved out of the flame. Those are the 3 Hebrew boys, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's who that was. Verse 60. Daniel, for his innocency, was delivered from the mouth of lions. And thus consider ye throughout all the ages that none that put their trust in him shall overcome. Fear not the words of a sinful man, for his glory shall be dung and worms. Today he shall be lifted up, and tomorrow he shall not be found, because he is returned into his dust, and his thought is come to nothing. Wherefore, ye my sons, be valiant and show yourselves men in behalf of the law, for by it ye obtain glory. And behold, I know that your brother Simon is a man of counsel. Give ear unto him always, and he shall be a father unto you. And notice how Mattathias knew his sons and knew their strengths. So when it comes to counsel, you listen to Simon. As for Judas Maccabeus, he hath been mighty and strong, even from his youth up. Let him be your captain, and fight the battle of the people. So Judas became the captain or the warrior. Take also unto you all those that observe the law, and avenge ye the wrong of our people. Recompense fully the heathen, and take heed the commandments of the law. So he blessed them, and he was gathered to his fathers, and he died in the 104 and 6th year, and his sons buried him in the sepulchres of his fathers at Modem, and all Israel made a great lamentation for him. First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 3. Then his son Judas, called Maccabeestv, and that word Maccabeestv, by the way, means hammer, right? Rose up in his stead, and all his brethren helped him, and so did all they that held his father, and they fought with cheerfulness the battle of Israel. So he gat his people great honor, and put on a breastplate as a giant, and girt his warlike harness about him, and he made battles protecting the host with his swords. In his acts he was like a lion, and a lion's whelp roaring for his prey. For he pursued the wicked and sought them out, and burned up those that vexed his people. Wherefore the wicked shrunk for fear of him, and all the workers of iniquity were troubled, because salvation prospered in his hand. What is salvation? This is another scripture we can use for salvation. What was salvation? Being delivered from our enemies. That's the same thing you read where, brothers and sisters? Luke 1:68 on down. What is salvation? Being delivered from our enemies. That's what it is. That's another precept y'all could use. Verse 7. He grieved also many kings, and made Jacob glad with his acts, and his memorial is blessed forever. Moreover, he went through the cities of Judah, destroying the ungodly men out of them, and turning away wrath from Israel. So not only did he get at the heathen, a lot of the Israelites that we read in chapter 1 that made alliances with the heathen, he destroyed them too. So that he was renowned unto the uttermost part of the earth, and he received unto him such as were ready to perish. Then Apollonius gathered the Gentiles together, and made a great host out of Samaria to fight against Israel. Which thing when Judas perceived, he went forth to meet him. So he smote him and slew him. Many also fell down slain, but the rest fled. Wherefore Judas took spoils, and Apollonius' sword, and therefore he fought his whole entire life long. Verse 13. Now when Seron, the prince of the army of Syria, heard that Judas had gathered unto him a multitude and a company of the faithful to go out with him to war, he said, I will get me a name and honor in the kingdom, for I will go fight with Judas and with them that are with him, who despise the king's commandment. Verse 15. So he made him ready to go up, and there went with him a mighty host of the ungodly to help him, and to be avenged of the children of Israel. Verse 16. And when he came near to going up of Beth Horon, Judas went forth to meet him with a small company, who when they saw the host coming to meet him, said unto Judas, how shall we be able, being so few, to fight against so great a multitude, so strong, seeing that we are ready to faint with fasting all day? Unto whom Judas answered, it is no hard matter, for many to be shut up into the hands of a few, and with the God of heaven it is all one, to deliver with a great multitude or a small company. For the victory of battle standeth not in the multitude of hosts, but strength cometh from heaven. They come against us in much pride and iniquity to destroy us and our wives and our children and to spoil us. But we fight for our lives and our Lord. Wherefore, the Lord himself will overthrow them before our face. And as for you, be ye not afraid of them. Now, as soon as he had left speaking, he leapt suddenly upon them, and so Saron and his hosts were overthrown before him. And they pursued them from the going down of Beth Horon unto the plain, where were slain about 800 men of them, and the residue fled into the land of the Philistines. Then began the fear of Judas and his brethren, and exceeding dread to fall upon the nations round about them, insomuch as his fame came unto the king, and the nations talked of the battles of Judas. So Judas was doing so much damage that now Antiochus heard about him. Remember, Antiochus had a big, vast kingdom, and you would have, little insurrections here and there, but Judas was doing so much damage that Antiochus heard about this guy. Verse 27. Now when King Antiochus heard these things, he was full of indignation, wherefore he sent and gathered all the forces of his realm, even a very strong army. And he opened also his treasure and gave his soldiers pay for a year, commanding them to be ready whensoever he needed them. Nevertheless, when he saw the money of his treasuries failed, and that the tributes in the countries were small because of the dissension and plague which he had brought upon the land, in taking away the laws which had been of old time. So what happened was Antiochus, when he started going into these countries and removing ancient laws and just causing basically chaos, guess what was happening? His tribute wasn't coming in the way it was supposed to come in, because there was a lot of chaos in these areas. So that was dumb. That was dumb. Verse 30. See, Alexander didn't do this. Remember what we read earlier in the lesson? When Alexander came in, he allowed the Jews to keep their laws. Antiochus was stupid. He did not. He tried to forcibly Hellenize us. So he's getting a different result, and it's not good. Verse 30. He feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did before, for he had abounded above the kings that were before him. Wherefore, being greatly perplexed in his mind, he determined to go into Persia, there to take tributes to the countries and to gather much money. So he left Lysias, a nobleman and one of the blood royal, to oversee the affairs of the kingdom from the river Euphrates into the borders of Egypt, and to bring his son Antiochus until he came again. Verse 34. Wherefore he delivered unto him the half of his forces and the elephants, and gave him charge of all the things that he had done, as also concerning them that dwelt in Judea and Jerusalem. Verse 35. To wit, when he had sent an army against them to destroy and root out the strength of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem, and to take away their memorial from that place, and that he should put strangers in all their quarters and divide their land by lot. Notice that every time the nations overthrow us, they put strangers in our land, going all the way back to the time the Assyrians did it. Y'all notice that? Y'all notice the pattern I'm talking about tonight, that history is cyclical. It keeps repeating itself. Verse 37. So the king took the half of the forces that remained and departed from Antioch, his royal city, the 147th year, having passed the river Euphrates, he went through the high countries. Then Lysias chose Ptolemy, son of Dorymenes, Nicanor, and Georgius, men of the king's friends. And with them he sent 40,000 footmen and 7,000 horsemen to go into the land of Judah to destroy it, as the king had commanded. So they went forth with all their power and pitched at Emmaus in the plain of the country. And the merchants of the country, hearing of the fame of them, took silver and gold very much with servants, and came into the camp to buy of the children of Israel for slaves. Do you guys see this? That during the time of the Greeks, that's why when people say the other nations, the other nations have to pay. When they heard that the Greeks were coming against us, do you know that the merchants of the other nations took their gold and silver and was hoping that when we were overthrown, they could buy us and put us in slavery? Do you guys see that? A power also of Syria and the land of the Philistines joined themselves unto them. Now when Judas and his brethren saw that miseries were multiplied, and that the forces did encamp themselves in their borders, for they knew how the king had given commandment to destroy the people and utterly abolish them, they said one to another, let us restore the decayed state of our people. That's what we're trying to do today. We're trying to restore the decayed fortune of our people. And let us fight for our people in the sanctuary. Then was the congregation gathered together, that they might be ready for battle, and that they might pray and ask mercy and compassion. Verse 45. Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. There was none of her children that went in or out. The sanctuary was also trodden down, and aliens kept the stronghold. And the heathen had their habitation in that place, and joy was taken from Jacob, and the pipe with the harp ceased. Wherefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Mashpah over against Jerusalem, for in Mashpah was the place where they prayed aforetime in Israel. Then they fasted that day and put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their head and rent their clothes, and laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their image. Now, they brought also the priest's garments and the first fruit and the tithes, and the Nazarites they stirred up, who had accomplished their days. Then cried they with a loud voice towards heaven, saying, what shall we do with these, and whither shall we carry them away? Verse 50 is a very important verse. I'm not going to go to any precepts on it right now. When you go to the book of Judges Every time the children of Israel cried out to the Most High sent a savior, which was one of the judges, right? When you read in the book of Revelation, right, there's a scripture in the book of Revelation, is escaping me right now because I'm kind of winging it, but it speaks about the Most High, the prayers of the saints coming up before the Most High, and the Most High hearing our prayers, which is what is going to prompt him to send Christ. He's going to hear our prayers and our crying. It's in the same chapter where it speaks about the saints of the Most High standing before the throne and asking the Most High, how long before you avenge us? How long? Right? Real quick, let me see if I can find it. I hate saying stuff. Let's see if I can find it. Let me see if I could wing it and find it. Revelation chapter 6. So let's do that. Bible Gateway real quick. Then we're going to get back in because it's a lot of reading and I want to be done in the next half an hour. I don't want to keep you out too long, so I don't want to go too many precept happy. Let's see. Revelation chapter 6. Right, this is the one about the us asking for mercy. There was another one. I'm gonna have to get that another time. Is it 5? Nope, it's not 7. It's definitely not 7. Is it 8? It's one of these chapters, y'all. I'm not going to spend too much time right now. It's been a minute. It's definitely not 10. But it's one of these chapters where the prayers of the Most High are going up. Our prayers are going up before the Most High. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Let's come back here. And maybe at the end of the class, I'll go look for it again. So let's pick it up from verse 51 in chapter 3. For the sanctuary, but that's basically what's going to happen. The Most High is going to hear our prayers, and the Most High is going to send Christ to deliver us, right? 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Stop sharing my screen for 1 second. All right, I knew it. I'm see when you wing it, you skip stuff. Share screen, full screen. Yeah, I just can't let that sit. Y'all should know me. I can't let that sit. Right. This Revelations 5 and 8. Right. It says, and when they had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. Verse 9. So that's pretty much it, right? That's pretty much what I was looking for, I believe. Yeah. And that was Revelation 5, right? It's Revelations 8 and 4. Let's do the whole chapter. Right. This is Revelations chapter 8, verse 4. It says, well, verse 3, right? And another angel came and stood at the altar having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense that he should offer it up with the prayer of the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came up with the prayers of the saints ascended before God and out of the angel's hand. Verse 5, and the angel took the censer and filled it with fire and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and earthquakes, right? Because when that prayer comes up before the Most High, that's when the Most High is going to activate, like we read about in the book of Judges and other places in the Bible. When them prayers come before the Most High hears our cry, the Most High is going to activate and he's going to send his son. That's what I was trying to say. But let's come back to where we should be right here. Verse 51. For thy sanctuary is trodden down and profane, and thy priests are in heaviness and brought low. Verse 52. And lo, the heathen are assembled together against us to destroy us. What things they imagine against us thou knowest. Verse 53. How shall we be able to stand against them except thou, O God, be our help? Then they sounded with trumpets and cried with a loud voice. After this, Judas ordained captains over the people, even captains of thousands and hundreds and over 50s and tens. That's where we get it from, but it really started with Moses, right? But as for such as were building houses or betrothed wives or planting vineyards or were fearful, those he commanded that they should return every man to his own house according to the law. So the camp removed and pitched upon the side of Emmaus, and Judas said, arm yourselves and be valiant, and see that ye be in readiness against the morning, that ye might fight with these nations that are assembled together against us to destroy us in our sanctuary. For it is better for us to die in battle than to behold the calamities of our people and our sanctuary. Nevertheless, as the will of God is in heaven, so let him do. 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 4. Then took Georgius 5,000 men and 1,000 of the best horsemen, and removed out of the camp by night, to the end that he might rush upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And the men of the fortress were his guides. Verse 3. Now when Judas heard thereof, he himself removed, and the valiant men with him, that he might smite the king's army which was at Emmaus, while as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp. In the mean season came Georgius by night into the camp of Judas. When he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains, for he said, these fellows flee from us. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had their armor, no swords in their hand. And they saw the camp of the heathen, that it was strong and well harnessed, and compassed round about with horsemen, and they were expert of war. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, fear ye not this multitude, neither be ye afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea, when Pharaoh pursued them with an army. Now therefore let us cry unto heaven, if peradventure the Lord will have mercy upon us, and remember the covenant of our fathers, and destroy this host before our face this day. Then so all the heathen may know that there is one that delivereth and saveth Israel. Then the strangers lifted up their eyes and saw them coming over against them. Wherefore they went out into the camp to battle, but they that were with Judas sounded the trumpets. So they joined the battle, and the heathen, being discomfited, fled into the plain. Howbeit all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword, for they pursued them unto Gezerah, and unto the plains of Idumea and Azotus and Jamnia, so that there were slain of them 3,000 men. So there was slain of them upon 3,000 men. Verse 16. This done, Judas returned again with his host from pursuing them, and said to the people, be not greedy of much spoil, insomuch as there is a battle before us. And Georgius and his hosts are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies and overcome them, and after this ye may boldly take spoils. As Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out the mountain, who, when they perceived the Jews had put their host to flight, and were burning the tents, for the smoke that was seen declared that what was done. When therefore they perceived these things, they were sore afraid, and seeing also the host of Judas in the plain ready to flight, they fled everyone into the land of the strangers. Then Judas returned to spoil the tents, where they got much gold and silver and blue silk and purple of the sea and great riches. After this, they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving and praised the Lord in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endureth forever. Thus Israel got a great deliverance that day. Now all the strangers that escaped came and told Lysias what happened, who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he were done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded him were come to pass. The next year, therefore, following Lysias gathered together 3,000 choice men of foot and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. So they came into Idumea and pitched their tents at Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. And when he saw that mighty army, he prayed and said, blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David, and gave us the host of strangers into the hand of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and his armor bearer. Shut up this army into the hands of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen. Make them to be of no courage, and cause their boldness of their strength to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction. Cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving. So they joined the battle, and there was slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judas's soldiers, and how they were ready to either to live or die valiantly, he went to Antiochia and gathered together a company of strangers, having made his army greater than it was. He proposed to come against Judea, come again into Judea. Then said Judas unto his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up and cleanse and dedicate the temple. This is what we're talking about. This is what this holy day is about, the feast of dedication. Remember, after Solomon built the temple, he dedicated the temple. Then we know the Babylonians came in and destroyed the temple. During the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, right, the temple was started again, and eventually it was dedicated again. That's the second temple, right? So now we see at this time, the heathen had gotten control of the second temple, right? But the Most High delivered the temple or the sanctuary back into the hands of Judas. So what did they do? They did the same thing that Solomon did. They rededicated the temple. Same thing. That's what we're reading about right here. Verse 37, where upon this, all the hosts assembled themselves together and went into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profaned and the gates burned and the shrubs growing in the court, as it in a forest or one of the mountains, yea, the priests' chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their head and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces and blew an alarm with the trumpets and cried to heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when they had consulted what to do with the altar of burning offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest there be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple and hallowed the courts. And they also made new holy vessels. And into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar burn offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlesticks they lighted, that they might give light into the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and cisterns and harps and cymbals. They did it the same way Solomon did it. Probably not on the level of grandeur, obviously, that Solomon did, but they literally looked at the pattern that Solomon did and did the same thing when they got back a hold of the temple. Verse 55. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Thus there was very great gladness amongst the people, for the reproach of the heathen was taken away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days. That's why we're keeping the Feast of Dedication now. When Solomon did his, he didn't ordain it for it to be kept every year. But the Maccabees did, and it's a good feast. It's a good feast to keep. and it has a meaning. The Most High delivered the temple from the heathen back into our hands. From the 5 and 20th day of the month Caselu, with mirth and gladness. And at that time, also they builded up the Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. And they set there a garrison to keep it, and fortified Bethsura to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea. So giving all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High. Real quick, let me see something. Revelations, let me see something, because you guys are putting stuff in the chat, which is good. Which is good, because I'm winging it, so you guys probably got a chance to do a little research. Let me see something real quick. Right. Okay, yeah, you guys got it. That's it. Right. So again, we're going to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High. I wish you, brothers and sisters, a blessed Feast of Dedication. Hopefully you brothers and sisters got something from a lesson. We're going to be back here next week for the Academy, 3 p.m. Eastern time, like always. But I'm on Eastern time right now, so it's actually gotten dark outside. So that's the reason why I started the lesson when I did. You brothers and sisters are doing a great job. We should have everybody back and be at full attendance for the Academy next week. I appreciate it. Also, shout out to everybody that's watching on the Lines of Israel class page, to y'all as well. We appreciate you, brothers and sisters, joining us as well. And I'm not going to prolong this. It's been a good lesson. Hopefully, everybody was edified. You guys already know how I do. If the lesson was edifying and you got something out of it, just put 1 in the chat. Let me know everything made sense. And then we are going to get right up on out of here. I'm not going to prolong it. If it made sense, just put 1 in the chat. And let me know that understanding was understood. Okay, all praises, all praises, all praises. Okay, cool. All right, we got some people that's just joining us, but we've been here since 4 o'clock. So shout out to everybody that's just joining us. You guys can definitely go back and you guys could definitely catch the replay. Okay. So, yeah, I think that we're pretty much done here. It's your brother priest Danyaahla, representing Lines of Israel, representing Maccabeestv. I appreciate you, brothers and sisters, once again. And with that being said, we are out of here. I say shalom.
I want to praise you, Yahweh. I want to thank you, Yahweh. I'm so grateful, Yahweh. I want to thank you, Yahweh.
For the promises. Life is a blessing and life is a lesson. Life is a setback and life is progression. Life is uneasy at times, life is comfortable. Life will lift you up and at times life will humble you. Life is a gift, you better thank the Lord for it. Every chance you get, someone is less fortunate. Life goes in circles, life throws you curveballs. Life can be deceiving like preachers in the church halls. Life isn't promised. If I could be honest, the fact that I'm alive, that time has me astonished. Cause I came from the underground, being tossed around, being lost and found. Now they adore the sound of the priest, far from a nuance. Verses are proverbs, writtens are the new songs. Another song for the blocks and the avenues. Everything is plain, I don't speak to them in parables.
I want to praise you, Yahweh.
I want to praise you.
I want to thank you, Yahweh. I'm so grateful.
I'm so grateful.
Yahweh. I want to thank you, Yahweh.
For the power I see the world through different eyes. Every Sunday got the preacher telling different lies, hearing things that I really couldn't visualize. Should've listened, Big said you'd be hypnotized. I was a victim too, I say respectfully. They all up in the soup, don't know the recipe. Talking about I'm not who I was bred to be. Count me out, man, who made you the referee? Trying to get stripes, trying to cloud chase. At 19, I made an about face. Thanks to Christ, it's also about grace. And they lied when they said it ain't about race. But that's another song, I ain't the first to tell you. Woke up on a deeper and a surface level. Learned the laws and the Lord's changed my attitude. And this song is to show you how a gratitude. I'm so grateful.
I wanna praise you.